Welcome to the Grace and Grit podcast, made for women who want their healthiest years to be ahead of them, not behind them. Join your host, Courtney Townley, right now as she breaks down the fairy tale health story you have been chasing all of your life into sensible action steps and lasting change. Welcome to the Grace and Grit podcast. This is your host, Courtney Townley. Thank you so much for being here. I do not take that lightly. I know there's a lot of places you could be, and I hope that you feel that by the end of this episode today, it was well worth your time. Now, to say that 2020 has been a wild ride so far is the biggest of understatements. And I want to start the podcast today by saying I hope that you're doing okay. It's been a lot. And we are living at a time where stress is at an all-time high for a lot of people. And we are living at a time where mental and physical resilience is more important than ever. And all of those things, managing stress and nurturing resiliency, demands that you honor your body's need for adequate restoration. So I hope that you are extending yourself that kind of grace. And I hope that you are extending buckets of compassion and grace and kindness to everyone around you. Now, COVID disrupted life for all of us in a huge way. And then just as we started to get back on our feet, the Amy Cooper incident and then the murder of George Floyd fueled outrage around the very real issue of racism, not just in the US, but around the world. And, let me be clear that if you do not think that racism is a health topic, this may not be the podcast for you. And here's why I say that's true. I have long taught on this podcast that health is not one-dimensional. I know the fitness and diet industries tend to focus on just the dimension of physical health. But health is really your ability to manage all of the things in your life that have the potential to act as stressors on your life. So health is very multidimensional because the things that could possibly influence your stress bucket in life is a lot of things. And a social injustice like racism can definitely influence the stress in your life. And if you are someone who constantly feels unsafe, or if you are always feeling oppressed, attaining deep health will be virtually impossible. Now, I want you to hear that I am in no way an expert on the social injustice of racism, not by a very long shot. In fact, I am learning so much. I am such a student in this with everything that's going on right now. And I am really learning to listen and, just observe and absorb and understand something that has not been my reality. Meaning I am not a person of color, and I have not been discriminated against in my life. Not in that way, not because of the color of my skin. So I do not feel at all that I am the person to be leading a conversation on racism. And that's not what this podcast is about today. But as a business owner, as a leader in the health and wellness space, I do feel it's important to make it clear that over the past couple of weeks, I have become hyper aware of places I could do better and very aware of my lack of awareness around the struggles that people of color are facing. And my lack of awareness is a problem. And I don't want to be a part of the problem. I want to be a part of the solution. So, not only do I live in the United States, but I live in a predominantly white state. I live in Montana. So we do not have a lot of people of color in Montana. I also work in an industry that is overwhelmingly white. I do not have a lot of people of color in my circles of influence, which is a part of the problem, right? It's contributing to the problem because I'm not being exposed to different opinions and different experiences. And I massively am becoming aware of that gap. And it's interesting because this awareness started when about 6 weeks ago, we ran the Confident Women Rising Summit, which was an incredible summit dedicated to helping women 40 plus build confidence in their ability to lead themselves in the health arena. And we had over 4,000 women from all over the globe participate in that event. And I received several direct messages and emails from people pointing out that I did not have any Black women represented on my panel of speakers. And that was in no way intentional for me not to have them, but it was also not intentional to have them. And here's why that's a problem. I am someone who is for women's health. Not white women's health, but women's health. And so if I'm not representing women in a diverse way, and I am not, expanding my own circle of influence, I am contributing to the problem. I'm not making all women feel welcome and safe in my circle, and that does not sit well with me. So that is a huge awareness that I am facing right now that I am so willing to rumble with. I'm definitely starting to scratch the surface of what some solutions might be, but I have a lot of learning to do. So I want to be really honest with you that I almost did not record a podcast today because I'm so used to coming on to the podcast and really feeling confident in my ability to offer you a perspective or a skill or a tool that I think would be useful to you because I'm well-versed in it. But that is not the case with this. So I don't really know what the right words are. And I was actually planning on the month of June focusing entirely on allowing joy into our lives and what it looks like to allow pleasure in a healthy way. And we are definitely going to tackle that theme. But I think it would have been very negligent and irresponsible for me to not address the current climate of our culture, to not take ownership of where I could do better in my own business. So I'm telling you that because I just want you to be prepared that this episode will be messy. And all my episodes are probably messy to some degree, but this will be more messy and more imperfect than usual because I'm totally a beginner. That's how I feel. And I'm totally open to that. And I'm actually really excited about that. I mean, it's really uncomfortable to see all of the spaces where I've missed the mark and how little I actually know. And yet, that's also simultaneously very exciting to me because I know that I will grow. I know that I will do better. I know that I will learn a lot about myself. Now, interestingly, when I was getting ready for the podcast today, I was reviewing some older podcasts, and I came across last year's June theme, which was modern day mental health. And for a moment, I considered, I should just replay those episodes because they're more relevant now than ever. I mean, the topic of mental health right now is so incredibly important. But I just want to point out to you that if you missed that theme last June, it is still very relevant right now. And if you are needing maybe some resources and help with mental health, I would definitely encourage you to check those out. It's episode 168 through 171. But what I want to focus on just briefly, this is not going to be an epically long podcast today, but what I would like to focus on briefly today is a skill that I strongly believe is imperative to improving our health. It is also the linchpin to improving our life and bettering our world. And this is a skill that I talk a lot about with my clients, especially in the beginning stages of them working with me. It's a skill that if you are committed to becoming a fully expressed human who makes a meaningful contribution to the world, you've got to develop it. And the skill is the skill of listening. And I say it's a skill, but I really think listening is more of an art. And I think about arts a lot like I do sports. Like you're never really going to master it, right? Any artist will tell you they can always do better. They can always explore a different technique. There's always different ways to enter the space of listening and to become better at it. So I like to look at the art of listening as a lifelong pursuit. It's not something you can just check off your list and then just be done with it. Like, oh, I've got that skill. I'm good now. I don't have to work on that anymore. I think like so many things I teach, listening is a practice we need to build. And a practice is something we keep showing up to on the regular to refine and rework and explore and try new things and become better at. And I say it's one of the first things I teach my clients in the space of health, because the honest to God truth is most women are not in any way, shape, or form listening to the needs of their psychology or biology. Rather, they are dictating their agendas to them. And dictating our agendas to our body is not how we attain health, right? And if you've been around the circle for a while, this Grace and Grit space, you know that I always talk about health as a relationship that needs to be nurtured. And relationships do not flourish when someone is dictating to you, right? Relationships flourish when there's communication, there's listening, and yes, there's talking, but there is a lot of listening in healthy relationships. So if we learn to listen better to ourselves, to our hearts, to what we want for our life, to what our body is asking of us, we would be so much healthier. And I also just think, it's really interesting in relationship to what is happening in the cultural climate, in a radical way in the US. And I know it's happening elsewhere in the world. But definitely, this is where I live, so this is what I can speak to. If we're willing to listen, really listen, and not just turn a blind eye, and not just defend our opinions, and not just prove that we're right, but really listen. And we learned how to do that with all injustices in the world. Man, would we live in a safer and a healthier world. But it's not what we do. We don't listen. We prove, we dictate, we defend, we assume with ourselves and with the world around us. And health will never be born from that space. So another thing that, I am definitely in the thick of learning how to do right now is really listen. When I say really listen with curiosity and empathy, right? Which requires humility. Because listening with curiosity and empathy to ourselves or to another person, it's kind of admitting to ourselves that, we may be wrong. We may not know everything. There might be another possibility. And listening with curiosity and empathy, requires humility because it's also an admission that your experience is not everyone's experience. My husband always says to me, and my son, he has said this. I mean, I've been married to the man for, 17 years, I think we're going on. But he has said countless times that, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. You are meant to listen more than you talk. But that is not how most of us are living our lives. It's definitely not how I live my life. Now, I do in some spaces and places of my life. Most of my clients will tell you I'm an amazing listener. But when it comes to maybe talking to my husband or talking to somebody who I have a very different opinion from, I cannot tell you, in all honesty, that I'm always a good listener in those situations. And I'm not proud of it. I definitely see the danger in it. But like I said, it's something I am so committed to working on, which is one of the big reasons why I was also very hesitant to do a podcast today. I'm in such a space of wanting to listen and absorb and learn. And I don't feel like it's really the time for me to be doing a lot of talking. So I'm going to keep talking because I want to finish this podcast episode. But if you do follow me on social media, other spaces and places, I have been very quiet this week, just trying to take things in and just learn how I might be able to do things differently and see the spaces and the gaps where I definitely could do better in my business, in my personal life, just how I show up as a human in the world, especially as it relates to am I a part of the problem or am I a part of the solution? Because I am very committed to being a part of the solution. Now, when I was getting ready for this podcast, I was doing a little bit of research on listening. And I came across an article. There's a gentleman named Hayakawa, I think is how you say his name. And he wrote a book called The Use and Misuse of Language. And he says this about listening, which I thought was really beautiful. He says, listening does not simply mean maintaining a polite silence while you are rehearsing in your mind the speech that you're going to make the next time you can grab a conversational opening. Nor does listening mean waiting alertly for the flaws in the other person's argument so that later you can mow him down. Listening means trying to see the problem the way the speaker sees it, which means not sympathy, which is feeling for him, but empathy, which is experiencing with him. Listening requires entering actively and imaginatively into the other person's situation and trying to understand a frame of reference different from your own. And this is not always an easy task. It's definitely not an easy task because it requires that we put our own agenda aside, our own belief system aside. We create time and space, and then we practice patience and openness to really listen to the other person. And again, it's not always another person, right? Because again, I see women doing this to themselves all the time. They're not taking time to listen to their needs, to listen to their wants, to listen to their misalignments. And so they end up living their life feeling very misaligned, very unfulfilled, and very unhealthy. So listening is such an important ingredient to the health equation on so many levels. So instead of spending the time dictating, proving, defending, and looking for evidence that our own belief is right, we just listen with openness and curiosity. And confirmation bias is something that I had Dr. Jade Teta come on and talk about female hormones. This probably was about 1.5 years ago. It might have been almost 2 years ago now. But he spoke to confirmation bias in that episode, which was really the first time that, I mean, I'm sure I've heard the concept before, but the way that he spoke of it really, I just triggered something in me. Like, yeah, confirmation bias is such a real thing that we seek evidence for our belief system. That's kind of how we go into looking at information. And it's interesting because I think I have long taught confirmation bias, but I've never called it confirmation bias. Because what I teach, right, is the thought model where what we think is what we will always create evidence for. It's always what we'll seek evidence for. So if I think, this is really hard, building a business is really hard, I'm always going to look for evidence as to why building a business is so hard. It's almost like your thoughts become self-fulfilling prophecies, which a lot of my clients have heard me say before. And why is that true? Because what we think influences our emotional landscape, and how we feel will dictate what we do or don't do, and our actions are what create our results. So again, for example, building a business is so hard. Well, that makes me feel, what does that make me feel? It makes me feel, I think, challenged, maybe a little bit frustrated, but I'm going to go with challenged. I think it does make me feel challenged. And sometimes when I feel challenged, and especially if I'm overly challenged, to the point of almost feeling defeated, I'm not going to show up to do the things in my business that will actually grow my business. Or I am going to show up, but I'm going to make it unnecessarily difficult because I'm literally looking for the difficulty in it. And then I just prove to myself that building a business is really hard. So confirmation bias, and this is a definition I pulled from an article in Psychology Today, and the author's name was Shahram Heshmat. And what he said in this article about confirmation bias is that when people would like a certain idea or concept to be true, they end up believing it to be true. They are motivated by wishful thinking, and this error leads the individual to stop gathering information, which I read as they stop listening to all of the options and they just focus on the option they want to hear. So they stop gathering information when the evidence gathered so far confirms the views or prejudices one would like to be true. And then he goes on to say that once we have formed a view, we embrace information that confirms that view while ignoring or rejecting information that casts doubt on it. Confirmation bias suggests that we don't perceive circumstances objectively. We pick out bits of data that make us feel good because they confirm our prejudices. And thus, we become prisoners of our own assumptions. And I just think that speaks volumes of, again, I'm talking about listening today. And I think confirmation bias can really get in the way of us actually listening. Because when we're just looking for data that confirms what we already believe, we're not really listening to the other person. We're not listening to the other side of the story. And even in kind of the health industry, the wellness industry, I see a lot of kind of this confirmation bias when women, they think that diets should work. because, right, like their best friend lost 20 pounds using some diet. They read articles all the time about certain diets working for certain people. We live in a culture that has conditioned us to believe that diets should work, right? But they don't work for long-term sustainability. But because we want to believe so hard that they do work, we kind of ignore that evidence. And we keep bouncing from diet to diet to diet to diet, really kind of just using the same tactics, but never really getting anywhere over the long run. So it's a confirmation bias that can really hurt us. And that's just one example, right? Like we could have a confirmation bias about all the reasons why eating meat is good for you, all the reasons why being a vegetarian is good for you, why ketogenic is the best diet, why going paleo is the best diet. And then we only seek out information that validates that truth. And then all we're doing is proving ourselves right. We're never really growing or learning as human beings. Because maybe that's true. Maybe that way of eating or that thing works for you. But maybe it doesn't. And I would argue in a lot of cases it doesn't, because I've worked with a lot of women who have spent many years doing things that aren't working. So my point is that not listening, right? Because we have all these we're kind of in the space of confirmation bias, or because we just don't have a practice of learning how to listen well, it's a problem. It's a problem for our health in general. It's a problem for our physical health. It's a problem for our mental health. It's a problem for the health of our relationships. And it is most definitely a problem for the health of our society and our planet. The health of our bodies, the health of our culture, our society, our planet, it depends on us paying attention and listening and acknowledging our gaps and committing to doing better. And I am personally doing that in so many ways right now. And when I say I'm doing that, what I'm speaking to directly is I am so acknowledging my gaps. And I don't know exactly how to fill all the gaps yet, but I see a lot of gaps in my business, in the way that I'm showing up, especially in the online space, where I could do better to make all women feel more included. And I'm telling you that for accountability, right? I think declaration kind of is an element of accountability. Yeah, because I want to live up to that promise. I really, really do. So I can't tell you that I'm going to get there, swiftly or next week or even next month, but it is something I am dedicated to moving forward. And I'll tell you some active ways I'm doing that. I am definitely expanding my circles of influence. I am having hard conversations. And for me, that actually looks like really asking questions that, I don't know, I feel really almost naive asking, right? But asking questions, because I have a lot of questions. And it's willing to get uncomfortable. I am definitely putting myself in that beginner position of being a student. And I've registered for some courses. I'm taking a anti-racism in the wellness industry course with Chrissy King next week. I'm a part of some forums now with online business owners who are all committed to becoming more diverse and inclusive in their messaging. So those are kind of my initial actions. And I say initial actions because by no means will they be the only ones. But to wrap this up today, I just want to say that I think we can all benefit from learning how to listen better. And it's something that's so on my heart right now in so many ways. And I just wanted to come on here and share that with you today, because maybe it resonates for you, maybe it doesn't at all. And, that's okay too. But for me, it is not only something that I see limiting my inability to listen well in certain spaces of my life, is preventing me from acquiring the level of health I truly want in all the spaces of my life. And so I'm really leaning into learning how to be a better listener. And, to me, that means that I have to create time and space to listen to myself and to others, right? I have to know my own beliefs. I have to challenge my own beliefs, why I believe they're true. Are they still true for me? I have to, kind of unpack my thoughts, and I have to have time and space to spend with the people who I'm trying to understand better, right? My family, my friends, my community at large. So I'm definitely creating more time and space. I am definitely a fan of asking good questions. Again, my clients will tell you this. I spend a lot of time talking to them about asking good questions. I am really committed to maintaining an attitude of curiosity rather than judgment or of proving. So kind of that contrarian perspective of, if this is what I believe, what's the opposite perspective? And why is that a problem for me? So I'm really challenging my own belief system on so many things. And here's the way I really see it, is by not listening, I can see so many problems. I can see how not listening contributes to toxicity on so many levels with our physical health, mental health, our cultural health, health in every dimension. But I don't see the danger of learning how to become a better listener. I don't see the pitfall of that. And maybe there's something I'm missing. You're welcome to share your thoughts with me. But yeah, there's just so much possibility there and so much benefit from building that skill in my life. So I invite you to do the same. What would becoming a better listener look like along your own health journey, in your own family, in your own community, in the world at large, right? I mean, there's so many layers in which we could ask ourselves that question. And what is the problem? Where would the problem be with becoming a better listener? What is the downside of becoming a better listener? Because I don't see one. That's it, my friends. That's all I have for you today. I feel like it was a little bit all over the map. I was definitely trying to put together a lot of thoughts in my head. If you stuck with me, thank you. And I hope there was something in there for you. I hope there was something that just maybe allows you to move forward with a little bit more grace. All right. I will see you again soon. And thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here and being willing to rumble with hard stuff in your own life. I will see you again soon. Thank you for listening to the Grace and Grit podcast. It is time to mend the fabric of the female health story. And it starts with you taking radical responsibility for your own self-care. You are worth the effort. And with a little grace and grit, anything is possible.